Hello everyone. So today I got a request to do a tutorial on Warrior 1, and I understand why, because it's a tricky pose. I'm going to go over a few things about the pose before we get started. So first, what are the risks of this pose? Warrior 1, Virabhadrasana 1. It's a lot about the back leg that gets complicated since we put the foot down and we're not up on the toes. So it would be the ankle, the knee, for some the hip, lower back. Could also be for the neck if you jam the neck too much up. And what do we need to do to avoid the risk? So what are the component parts of Warrior 1? Well, one big thing is opening the hip flexor. So working with the psoas, opening and stretching it out. There's an effort of internal rotation of the hips, so the hips moving towards parallel, not necessarily going into parallel, but moving towards parallel. So that would be the effort of internal rotation of the hip. And the spine is going to be in extension as well as the hip. So we want to move against that a little bit, bringing the front and the back body together and lifting away from the hips. So we create a really nice arch in the spine that's not jamming into the lower back or the chest too much. So those would be some of the component parts of Warrior 1. And what I see a lot in this pose that people struggle with is actually that they keep the feet too narrow instead of taking them a little bit wider apart. So that just doing that is going to help you a lot. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about the pelvis when we get into practicing the pose. But that's definitely one of the biggest mistakes that I see, that they step forward from down dog and the feet are too narrow. So please take them wider. And then also the jamming of the pelvis forward, and that it can go into the knee, the ankle a lot, instead of just kind of letting the hip be and working more mindfully. So I'm gonna talk you through the pose. So we're gonna start with just warming up with a couple of lunges. So you're gonna stand on your mat and you're gonna step your left leg back and first take your knee down. And here I want you to focus on your pelvis tilting up and away from the front thigh. And let's reach our arms so you get a nice length in the spine. And from there, you tilt a little bit forward with the weight. Yeah? So let's take a couple of breaths. And in this pose, it's okay to tuck the pelvis a bit up and forward. Let's keep that and come up to crescent pose with your back knee bent. Keep lifting your frontal hip bones and then start to reach the back leg straight. So now the pelvis will tilt a little bit back, but you keep that work. Keep reaching your arms up. Let's take one more breath. And hands to the hips, step forward. And do the same thing with your other leg. So start with your knee down. Draw your frontal hip bones up. Release the buttock down. Reach your arms up. So really get away from that front thigh. Lift through the belly. Then you move forward. I have some ants crawling around here. So get into that hip flexor. Reach up and away from the hips. Take one more breath. Draw this left hip a little bit back and in. And then you stretch your back leg. So come into crescent pose back leg bent first, lift your pelvis, and from there start to straighten. So the pelvis will go a little bit back as you do that. Reach your arms up. Get really tall away from your hips. And then slowly step forward. Let's do one more. Step your left leg back, and this time I want you to draw your feet a little bit towards each other and hug the outer hips in to the midline. And do crescent again. Start to stretch your back leg straight from there. Hands to the hips, step forward. And step your right leg back. Draw your feet a little bit in towards each other. And squeeze your outer hips in. Firm them in. And from there, start to straighten your back leg. So you're striving towards parallel hips. Reach your arms up. And then slowly step forward. Okay, so we're gonna start using a block. A foam block is nice for this. You're gonna take it between your right knee and the wall. Now make sure that you're a bit wider than heel to heel with your feet. Plant down the outer back foot. Come up on your fingertips on the wall and rotate the back thigh and the glute forward towards the wall. Come high up on your fingertips. Lean forward in towards the wall and lift your frontal hip bones away from your front thigh. So you should notice that it's easier to parallel your hips here. Keep working that back foot and slowly come up. Keep reaching the chest forward and lift your arms up. So you don't want to tuck here. You want to let the hips go into extension. Also, the upper body is going to go into extension, but sandwich the front and the back and lift up and away from the hips. Then slowly come down, take your block and step forward. Other side. Step your right leg back. Take the block between the wall and your left knee. Come up on the fingertips, high up, and get into that back leg. So root down the outer back foot, rotate the back thigh and your buttock forward. So let your buttock be wide and long. Soften your groins. Keep the weight in the front heel, outer back foot. Draw your frontal hip bones gently up and slowly come up with the upper body. So don't tuck the pelvis too much forward here because then we can't keep the back leg straight. Turn your chest forward. Keep working that back leg, root down the front heel. Draw this front femur bone back into the hip socket and reach your arms up. If you do look up, let it come from your navel. So think about your drishti coming from deep within your core. Draw your navel in and up. You have that nice support. And slowly hand to the block, step forward. I hope that that was helpful. So what I use Warrior One a lot for is to prepare for back bends. And why is that? Because the hip goes into extension like a back bend. The spine goes into extension, but also there's that effort of the pelvis rotating forward, so internal rotation of the thighs and the hips. And we need that work in back bends because the knees want to go out. We want to keep them parallel so we access the psoas. Yeah? Another pose that it's a good prep for that maybe would be harder to guess is warrior 3. So balancing on one leg. Here also, this upper hip wants to open, but the effort is towards parallel. Now, we shouldn't be too focused on parallel hips in warrior 1, but if you soften a little bit around the pelvis and you don't squeeze the pelvis around too much, it's going to be easier to get it into parallel. But it's more about the effort of going into parallel. It's not about being parallel. Yeah? So I hope that you get some help from this, and please ask me if you have any questions.